Minus 2 minutes. Frankie, launch position.
Frankie, launch position.
Verify pre-launch out, launch on.
Roger.
Payload timer 0.
Payload timer 0.
Equipment link okay.
Roger.
Stand by to transfer the cluster to internal. 1 minute 40 seconds. 1 minute 35. 1 minute 30 seconds. Transfer cluster to internal power for flight. Cluster on the internal. Verify ready to fire. Telemeter tape on. Telemeter tape on. Online launch will be 60 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark 60 seconds. Final weight reading. Automatic lock stopping off. 55 seconds.
Countdown for an Army space shot. In a few seconds, the Army will orbit another advanced scientific Earth satellite for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Most stories begin at the beginning. This one, of initial Army contributions to space exploration, begins near the end.
You start that first drive. 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Born in fire, its lifetime measured in seconds, the rocket lifts its satellite payload to its appointed place in space. The voice of an Army satellite. As it begins its solitary rounds in space, a brilliant chapter of Army history is closing. It begins on the battlefields of the nation's past. Constantly searching for better tools for its fighting men, the Army first used rockets in combat more than 100 years ago in the Mexican War. It experiments with them again during the First World War. Dr. Robert H. Goddard successfully demonstrates rockets for the Army on November 10, 1918. The date is significant. The war ends the next day. Thereafter, official interest in rockets is to lag for 20 years. However, Dr. Goddard, father of modern rocketry, and a few other dedicated men, continue work. Their predictions are the objects of polite disbelief, for Dr. Goddard's liquid-propelled rockets fired during the 1920s are aimed straight into tomorrow. Another rocket pioneer, an Army captain, Leslie A. Skinner, spends his spare time during the 1930s working on what will eventually become the Army's famed bazooka. Rockets reach maturity in the Second World War, but these are small, short-range weapons with limited accuracy. Hoping to extend the range and accuracy of conventional field guns, the Army establishes a rocket branch in its Ordnance Office in 1943 and contracts for general rocket research with JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory of the California Institute of Technology. By the end of 1944, JPL confirms the feasibility of long-range rockets and missiles. Army-sponsored firings by JPL use Private A rockets to probe the upper atmosphere early in 1945. While this is going on, the rocket-propelled long-range missile comes of age. Here at Peenemünde, Rocket Development Center of the German Army. As the Second World War nears its end, a team of scientists headed by youthful Dr. Werner von Braun, originally organized to further a common interest in space travel, brings into being the V-2, the first operational ballistic missile. No signals from the ground guide the V-2. It carries its own electronic brain. There is no defense against it once it is fired. It comes too late in the war to affect the outcome, but the V-2 makes a profound impression, particularly upon the American Army, which witnesses its performance from the receiving end. Although Germany demands that their creation be used as a weapon, the Peenemünde scientists see the V-2 as the forerunner of tomorrow's rocket travel and plan for a future of space exploration. The dream does not die in the ashes of the Third Reich. When Germany collapses, Dr. von Braun and key V-2 scientists decide to surrender to the Americans. Far-sighted Army officers who have planned for such an opportunity seize the initiative. Arrangements are made to move the V-2 team to America. Largely through the efforts of then Colonel H.N. Toftoy and Major J.P. Hamill, 130 Peenemünde experts get contracts to work for the American Army. The group is relocated to the United States together with tons of captured documents and V-2s. Eventually, most of these scientists become citizens and are integrated into the Army missile program. Studies and recommendations resulting from the firings of captured V-2s expand the knowledge of all the armed services in the functions, handling, and firing of large ballistic missiles. The firings culminate in the historic bumper experiments, representing the combined efforts of an Army industry team. The bumper vehicle, this JPL Whack Corporal rocket, riding the business end of a V-2, is the first designed to probe beyond the Earth's atmosphere. February 24th, 1949. A bumper second stage soars 250 miles above the Earth. The Army is first to reach into the fringes of space. Somehow, the Army manages to continue rocket development, even though from 1944 through 1950, it gets but 17 cents of every dollar allotted to services for missiles. The first rocket-borne cameras record these spectacular new views of Earth. V-2s fired in cooperation with scientific institutions collect data on the upper atmosphere and cosmic radiation. These are the first tentative steps on the path to the stars. The research program also leads to new developments in weapons. America's first operational ballistic missile, the Corporal, evolves from the Whack Corporal research rocket. Amid the fertile farmlands of northern Alabama, the Army consolidates its expanding missile activities late in 1949. World War II Army ammunition and chemical warfare installations are joined and reactivated as Redstone Arsenal. Early in 1950, the Army moves the former German missile experts, other components of its missile team, and some military personnel here to continue rocket development. When the Army arrives, the neighboring town of Huntsville, Alabama's first state capital, is proclaiming itself the watercress capital of the world. The Army rocket activities change this, first to, and then to this. June 1950. Communist aggression in Korea underlines a need for advanced weapons to protect the free world. Thoughts of space travel, kept alive among members of the team at Redstone, are temporarily set aside in 1951 when the Army directs them to begin work on an advanced design ballistic missile with a 200-mile range. First called Major, later renamed Redstone. Expansion of the team and build-up of facilities coincide with radical advances in missile structure, propulsion, and control. It takes 2 years to bring Redstone to life, but the day comes when the proud parents can relax and smile, if only for a few moments, while the baby howls for the first time. Incorporating a self-contained guidance system of the type pioneered in the V-2 and a novel scheme of separating the explosive package from the rocket engine at the end of powered flight, The Redstone is America's first large ballistic missile. A weapon of war, it is destined for a place in history as the Model T of the free world's space age. Flight tests begin in August 1953. Initial firings confirmed the design. Even failures bring new information and make significant contributions to the program. By September 1954, the Army team realizes that the Redstone is ready for an assignment in space. Dr. Von Braun proposes that it be used as the first stage of a rocket vehicle to orbit an Earth satellite. Eventually, this Army proposal evolves into Project Orbiter, a joint Army-Navy undertaking which combines the Redstone and other Army rockets into a composite satellite launching vehicle. In mid-1955, however, newsrooms around the world get the sudden announcement that the United States will have a purely scientific satellite program, Project Vanguard. Project Orbiter is canceled. The Navy has carried on high-altitude research. Project Vanguard is to couple the Navy's research experience gained with small rockets like this one with the new and more sophisticated carrier rocket. Despite Army insistence that a satellite orbited immediately would enhance national prestige, its Redstone satellite launcher is replaced by one that exists only on paper. Ruled out of the satellite program, the Army team finds other uses for its Redstone as Soviet advances with military rockets prompt a need for longer-range ballistic missiles. Late in 1955, the Redstone becomes the building block for a bigger brother as the Army is directed to develop a missile with a range of 1,500 nautical miles. February 1956, the Army activates ABMA, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, at Redstone Arsenal. Major General John B. Medeiros arrives to take command. He gets extraordinary powers and priorities to expedite the big missiles, now deemed vital to free world defense. Two ABMA are assigned responsibility for the Redstone and the 1,500-mile Jupiter missile, the experienced civilian military team, and all facilities necessary to move missiles from conception to reality. It is an organization and a capability unique in the free world. This cluster of solid propellant rockets perched atop a Redstone missile turns it into a Jupiter C vehicle, the satellite launcher first proposed by the Army 2 years earlier in 1954. The first Jupiter C is fired 8 months after activation of ABMA. Assembled to test Jupiter missile parts, America's first rocket vehicle capable of orbiting a satellite is completely successful. It lofts this fully instrumented payload to new height and distance records, more than 600 miles above the Earth and 3,000 miles from the launch site. Analysis of flight records proves without a doubt that the Army has the know-how and the carrier rocket with which to orbit satellites. 2 more Jupiter Cs are fired, but not with satellites. Both carry test models of the Jupiter missile nose cone. August 8, 1957. A Jupiter C scores another Army first. Its scale model nose cone is brought back intact from space. Recovered by the Navy, it proves that man-made objects can survive the awesome heat of re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. A few months later, President Eisenhower shows the nose cone to the nation as proof of a growing national space and missile capability. This success finishes the Jupiter-C's job. The Army makes repeated offers to orbit satellites using spare Jupiter-C vehicles in support of Project Vanguard, but to no avail. General Medeiros is later to testify in congressional hearings. In various languages, our fingers were slapped and we were told to mind our own business. Then, in October 1957, a new sound, an electronic voice with a Russian accent, speaks from space. The Soviet Union scores a scientific and propaganda triumph. America's prestige suffers a body blow. A month later, a second Soviet satellite goes aloft. The red sound in space becomes a duet. By confidently promising to orbit a satellite within 90 days, the Army finally gets its chance. November 8, 1957. General Medeiros summons key ABMA personnel to a conference. He tells them the Army has been given the green light at last. As the Army team readies its flight-proven Jupiter-C, the nation's first satellite attempt is made with the Vanguard. Given time for adequate testing, the Vanguard might perform as designed, but there is no time in December 1957 after the Soviet space achievements. The nation's first satellite attempt ends like this. While the team at ABMA grooms its satellite launcher, then ships it to the firing site, other members of the Army project at JPL assemble the 18-pound satellite. The experiments designed by Dr. James Van Allen for the spherical Vanguard satellite are repackaged to fit within the Army satellite's slender shell. At Cape Canaveral in late January 1958, under conditions of extreme secrecy, the firing crew prepares the Jupiter-C for launching. Final checkout proceeds with painstaking care. The Army's reputation, the prestige of the United States, will ride with this rocket. As tension mounts hourly, severe winds aloft twice force postponement of the planned firing time. Observations on the third day still indicate 100-mile-an-hour winds aloft. General Medeiros weighs the consequences, then makes his decision. Go ahead. The carefully shrouded satellite is hoisted to its place at the very top of the towering composite rocket. The vehicle gets one final check. Fueling operations are completed. January 31st, 1958. 84 days after getting the assignment, the Army stakes a claim in space for the free world. A few hours later in Washington, Dr. William Porter, chairman of the IGY committee, tells a press conference,
The National Academy of Sciences and the National Science Foundation announced that as part of the U.S. International Geophysical Year program, a scientific Earth satellite was placed in orbit at 5 seconds after 10:55 p.m. by means of a Jupiter-C rocket vehicle launched by the Army at Cape Canaveral, Florida. A similar statement is being issued by the President. And I should like to add my personal congratulations to the Army Ballistic Missiles Agency and to Dr. von Braun and Dr. Pickering and their colleagues for a job well done. Credit for the technical part of this achievement than any others in this country. First, Dr. Werner von Braun, Director for Development, Operations of the Army Ballistic Missiles Agency. Dr. von Braun, would you rise, please? Dr. James A. Van Allen, head of the Physics Department of the State University of Iowa, who is chairman of the Working Group on Internal Instrumentation of the panel for the Earth Satellite Program. Dr. Van Allen. And Dr. William H. Pickering, Director of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory of the California Institute of Technology, chairman of our Working Group on Tracking and Computation. These three gentlemen have all had a direct and important part in this achievement.
The momentous achievement of orbiting a satellite will shortly be given new significance as instruments in the satellites, Explorer-1, send back data enabling Dr. Van Allen to chart the great radiation belt in space that will bear his name. The next morning's papers make the Army's future part in space exploration seem assured. Now, in the weeks that follow the launching of the first satellite, demonstrated capability in space brings the Army a host of new assignments. 2 more satellites are orbited with Jupiter-C vehicles. Information collected by the Army explorers on radiation and temperature extremes in space delights the scientific community. General Medeiros moves up to head the Army Ordnance Missile Command and prepares the first General Mission Directive giving ABMA a space assignment. The nation seems ready to listen as Army spokesmen take the lead in urging an accelerated national space effort. They point out the need for a unified program, a sense of urgency, quick decisions, and a well-financed, long-range plan to give the United States a meaningful capability in space. Space projects are accomplished without delaying missile development. When the Army is directed to fire probes toward the moon, the mighty Jupiter is ready to fill the need for a more powerful rocket vehicle. It becomes the first stage of the new carrier rocket called the Juno 2. Weighing slightly more than 13 pounds, the Luna probes are packaged by JPL to further explore the radiation fields in space discovered by the Army satellites. As the Luna probes are readied, Congress takes the first step toward a unified national space effort. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration is created and assumes overall control of the project. December 1958. Payload ever launched by a Juno 2 just misses achieving the speed required to free it from the influence of the Earth's gravity. The probe travels 65,000 miles out and returns, collecting data that confirms existence of a second great radiation belt far in space. The stakes in the game are raised again as the Army prepares its second lunar probe. Once more, the prestige of the United States literally rides with an Army rocket, and once more, the Army comes through. March 3rd, 1959. There are no might-have-beens this time. At 11 minutes past midnight, the free world's first successful probe into space is sent on its way. Passing within 35,000 miles of the moon, it goes on to orbit the sun. Pioneer 4, the Army-launched space probe, speaks to Earth from 400,000 miles in space, proving the feasibility of radio communication with vehicles traveling in the void of the cosmos. And while this is in progress, other members of the Army team work towards still another goal in space flight. They call their project a bioastronautical experiment. The world's press is to name it simply the monkey shoots, after two young ladies named Abel and Baker. With NASA again sponsoring the experiment, the Army, with assistance from the Navy, prepares to send the two monkeys into space in air-conditioned capsules fitted within a Jupiter missile nose cone that also carries its normal military missions. May 28, 1959. Just before dawn, the monkeys begin their trip. Instruments on the ground monitor their reactions to the terrific acceleration. From 300 miles in space, Abel's heartbeat signals all is well. Less than an hour after the firing, the Navy recovery team has the nose cone on board ship. The capsule containing Monkey Abel is withdrawn. The space traveler emerges. Alive and unharmed after enduring the shocks of re-entry and deceleration, the monkeys have blazed an Army trail for the men who will follow them into space. Several months earlier, NASA has selected the Army's old reliable, the Redstone missile, for the most important of all rocket flights, the first with human passengers. The Army team is chosen to conduct these firings, the prelude to manned spaceflight. And even before this, models take shape at ABMA as the Army team looks ahead to the time when men will no longer be limited to brief forays into space. In August 1958, the Department of Defense directs ABMA to begin work on America's first true space transportation system. This program, Project Saturn, clusters 8 proven rocket engines into a super space booster with 1.5 million pounds of thrust, the horsepower equivalent of 20,000 diesel locomotives. With various upper stages, the Saturn can put scientific packages weighing many tons on other planets or send manned expeditions on voyages of discovery. It is to be the Army's legacy to space exploration. Even as work proceeds on the first Saturn booster, time runs out for the Army. October 21st, 1959. In line with a national policy of peaceful exploration of space, the President directs transfer of some civilian members of the Army team at ABMA and Project Saturn to NASA. Although the Army will continue missile development, Army rocket vehicles will no longer carry the nation's space explorers.
Mark 60 seconds, final weight reading, automatic rocket stopping off. 55 seconds.
Now, in the final moments of the countdown for the last Army space shot, a brilliant chapter in the long history of Army courage, persistence, and imagination comes to a close. This story began near the end. It documents the Army's contributions to the beginnings of another story, man's greatest adventure, the exploration of space. That story has no end.
5 seconds. 5.